Hi, and welcome to Hanaz Writers Podcasts. My name's Charlotte, and I work as a Year 2 teacher in a primary school in London. If you haven't heard any podcasts from Hanaz Writers before, then have a listen on their YouTube and Spotify channels. You can search for them on both websites, and you can start listening to the podcasts that they have available. As Valentine's Day has come and gone, in this podcast, I'm going to talk about love stories. Romeo and Juliet. This is one classic love story that everyone learns about in school. And William Shakespeare is the famous author who wrote the story and also produced the play about these two lovers. If you've not heard or read this book before, then I'm going to give you a quick summary on it. Now, in the story, two Italian families are at war with each other. They are the Capulets and the Montagues. And Juliet Capulet is the only daughter of the Capulets. Romeo Montague is the only son of the Montagues. They both meet at the Capulets' masked ball party. And Romeo sees Juliet and falls in love, and it's like love at first sight. He sees her, he falls straight madly in love with her. He has to then meet her after seeing her, and then she also then falls in love with him. Again, love at first sight, they meet each other, and also it's a masked ball, so they're probably wearing masks, so they haven't probably seen each other's faces fully. The thing is, the whole point of the story is that Romeo doesn't know that Juliet is a Capulet, and Juliet doesn't know that Romeo is a Montague. So they don't know that they're from opposite families who are in a fight with each other at this point. And Juliet then finds out that Romeo is a Montague from her nurse. However, this does not stop her from wanting to be with Romeo, and it doesn't stop Romeo either from wanting to be with her, because he also then finds out that Juliet is the daughter of the Capulets. So then Juliet decides to hatch a plan so that they can be together forever. And her plan is quite well, at this point, it's kind of a weird plan. She decides to pretend to die from drinking poison, but it's not really poison that she drinks. She just drinks something that causes her to fall asleep. And she goes into like a sleep-induced coma or something. And then she's hoping that after they kind of, they figure out she's dead, they'll leave her alone, and she'll somehow magically wake up from this coma and come back to life, and then she can be with Romeo forever, I'm guessing, or until, they eventually get married and so on and so on. At some point in the play, towards the end of the play, Romeo finds Juliet's body. He finds her dead, and he believes that she's dead, and he says, oh, he cannot live in a world without her. So he finds the poison bottle, he takes the poison, he drinks it, and then he kills himself for real. Juliet's lying next to him, and she's in her sleep-induced coma. She wakes up from her coma, she finds him dead next to her, and that he just killed himself drinking the poison that she hadn't actually drank. So then she finds a dagger, and then she kills herself for real using the dagger. Now the Capulets and the Montague parents then find them both dead. They come to Juliet's body, and they see both of him, Romeo and Juliet, and they both killed each other for all in the name of love. And they find them dead, and then they decide that at this point, this is a good time to end their feud and to stop fighting each other. So in this story, Shakespeare kind of gave Romeo and Juliet a tragic ending. They loved each other, they saw each other, they fell in love, but they can never be together. So they took very, I think some might say, very drastic measures by killing themselves or pretending to kill themselves and then killing themselves for real, just because they could not be with each other. So it's kind of like the most extreme, I think, extreme kind of consequence for falling in love. So then Shakespeare has given a tragic ending to the two lovers, but generally a great outcome for both the families, because the mum and the dads decide, what is the point of us arguing and fighting? Look what's happened. We've killed our two children. So why are we still fighting each other? And then they decide that no, fighting brings nothing but death, and of course, that's normal, that's natural, because fighting, what else would fighting bring? And then they decide to end the fight between each other. And I think maybe Shakespeare just wanted to maybe highlight the fact that out of everything, love is the strongest thing, and love kind of conquers everything. Love is stronger than other things in the world. Um, yeah, so that Romeo and Juliet is one of the best or well-known classic stories. Of course, there've been lots of like retellings of the story, and they've kind of made it modern, and they don't end up killing each other. I think towards the end of the movie, although I think Leonardo DiCaprio and I can't remember who Juliet was in the movie, which is really bad. But there is a movie of Leonardo DiCaprio and this beautiful lady, and they made Romeo and Juliet, and it was actually really nice. It was a very nice retelling of the story, I think, and they kind of jazzed it up and made it all classic, but they still kept the language, they kept the Shakespearean language, which I quite liked about the movie. If you ever have a chance to watch it, it's a really nice movie, Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a shame I cannot remember the lady's name, but she was also really good in the movie. So anyway, moving on. This leads me on to other love stories and other fairy tales that we know and love throughout the world. And what I have to say about it is it's mostly about princesses who needs to be rescued by a prince. And it's kind of like that old stereotype where the girl needs the man to come in and step in and help her and save her. And to be fair, these stories were made a long time ago, and that was the way it was seen. You have the brave knight, or the brave prince, or the brave king, and they come along and they face the evil, nasty demons or evil witches and wizards, and then they fight them off, and then they save the girl, they save the princess or the girl that was in trouble. They are the hero, and then they save the poor girl or woman, female character who was unfortunate to be captured or unfortunate enough to be put in that bad situation. Usually in these like old love stories and fairy tales, there's usually an old witch or an old wizard or even an evil stepmom or a person or a being who clearly is, not a nice person. You can see that they're very nasty and mean. You see what they look like as well. I think if you watch any Disney movies or any normal movies at the moment, you will see, yes, they will always portray the bad person as ugly, or they have a kind of weird fashion sense to them, or they have something that makes them strange and not normal at all. So you can kind of pinpoint them out in the movie or the film or the TV show, and oh, that person is the bad person because they've got the classic look, or they've got the classic evil laugh, or they're wearing something that you can tell makes them a bit mysterious. So back to these stories. So as I mentioned before, these stories have a prince and they have a princess, and they need to help save the princess. And usually at the end of the story, everyone is living a happy life, they have a happy ending, and they live happily ever after. But of course, there is also a moral to each of the stories. So I'm just going to talk about two famous love stories that I'd like to mention. One is Sleeping Beauty, and the other one is Cinderella. Now, if you've never heard or seen or watched Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty before, don't worry, I'm going to go through them quick summaries and also talk about the morals and why we need to learn about, well, what we can learn from these stories. Now, Sleeping Beauty, first of all, is a very famous story, and its moral is that you wait. It's good to wait for your one true love. And it's a nice story that's been told over and over again. Well, nice for some people because it's got that romantic, oh, the prince will come and save me. But I guess maybe if you're not into that kind of thing, and then it's kind of like a moral to be careful what you wish for, kind of thing, and good things come to those who wait. So, as the story goes, this is my summary, an evil fairy curses the princess to sleep for 100 years, and the curse can only be broken by true love's kiss. Many princes hear about what has happened to the beautiful princess, and they decide to be the first one to find her and to break the curse, of course, because they want to be the hero. However, the fairy makes it difficult for them. So when they try to go to the castle where the princess has been cursed in, worse, they make it difficult. They give them lots of different tasks that they need to complete before they can get inside the castle and find the princess. And out of all the princes, only one makes it. I think he's called Prince Charming. And when he finds the princess, he madly falls in love with her again. It's love at first sight. And he kisses her and he breaks the curse. And the only kind of moral I would say for Sleeping Beauty is that you better to wait for your one true love than to rush and kiss lots of other people that you don't really love, or to rush into things. So better to take your time, find your one true love, and be grateful for it. That's a very quick summary and rundown of Sleeping Beauty, to be fair. I think there's also a part towards the end of the story where they then find the fairy, um, and they do something to her, or they put her in jail. Well, not in jail, but they probably end up maybe killing her. I'm not sure. It's not very clear what they do to the evil fairy. But then the fairy makes haste and runs away. And she never curses anyone ever again, or something like that in the end of the story. So it's also kind of like, why are you being mean to people? Don't be mean to people. Because, you know, as much as you're jealous of this one child or jealous of what happened, nothing good will come out of it. So, it's better to live with the regret of, get over get over any anger, get over any misdeeds that might have happened to you, and be grateful for what you do have. Okay, so moving on to the next story, it's another famous classic love story, and it's Cinderella. Again, this story has been retold and told many, many times before. So, in my summary of my Cinderella story, in the beginning of this story, Cinderella loses her mum, and her father then remarries, and he finds a woman who actually has two daughters herself, but he falls in love with her, and he marries her, and she becomes Cinderella's stepmom. However, she doesn't like Cinderella, and she treats her very badly. Now, the dad has to leave the house and he has to go on a business trip, so he has to leave Cinderella all alone with her stepmom and her sisters. So while he's away, they treat her really badly. They make her kind of like the house slave. She has to do all the chores, and she has to clean and cook and do all the cleaning and the cooking and all the chores, basically. Yeah, so they treat her really badly. One day, then, the prince of the town, or wherever they're living, the village, a town, he announces that he's holding a ball for his birthday party. And he says everyone in the kingdom and the country is allowed to go. They're all invited. So stepmom and daughters decide to not tell Cinderella about the ball, but she ends up finding about it on the day because, of course, everyone's getting ready to go, and she's like, "Oh, where are we going?" So she asks, "Can she attend?" And the stepmom gives her many different tasks. She says, "You have to complete all of these difficult tasks, and before you can go to the ball." And of course, she gives her lots of different tasks, and they're basically impossible. She can't complete them all in one day. So when the ball starts and when they have to leave, Cinderella's left at home because her stepmom said she and her daughters will be going, except Cinderella because of course she didn't finish any of her tasks. So a fairy is crossing past. It's a good fairy, not a bad one. And the good fairy then takes pity on Cinderella and then visits her and says that she is her fairy godmother. And they gift her with a magic spell that kind of turns her rags into a beautiful dresses, and then they turn things into a horse and carriage. I think in the Disney movie it's like animals and a pumpkin, and they change that into a horse and carriage. And then they take her to the ball. So the fairy godmother also tells Cinderella that her spell will wear off just before midnight, so she must return before 12 o'clock. Otherwise, once the spell wears off, everything will go back to what they once were. So Cinderella agrees to do this, and off she goes to the ball. Now the prince sees her again at the ball when she arrives, and she looks beautiful and magical, and he falls in love with her at first sight. So she and the prince then dance. He asks her, of course, to dance with him, and she notices it. It's nearly midnight towards the end of the dance, and she decides that she needs to leave. So she tells him, "Oh, I've loved the dance, but I really must be going." And as she runs away, she drops a shoe. So she returns home and she gets home just before her stepmom and her sisters make it, and they are none the wiser because once she gets back to her house, everything turns back into what they once were. So no horse and carriage, her, her dress is a rag, and she's not pretty anymore. Pretty in this sense. So then the prince finds her shoe, which at this point I'm kind of surprised it didn't turn back into something, or her old shoe. It stays as a glass slipper in the story, which just kind of makes me think. The fairy said that the spell would finish, before midnight and everything would go back to what they once were. So were those slippers hers already, or I don't know. It's very random. But anyway, the prince finds the shoe, and he decides to find the woman that it belonged to, find the girl that it belonged to, and he does this by, again, taking to the whole town, the whole country, the whole whatever he's the king or the prince of, and he says that he's going to come round and try the shoe on everyone's foot, and whoever's foot that the shoe fits, it must be the girl that he was dancing with. So then the sisters then find out, and they talk about finding this one true love for the foot who will fit the shoe. And then the girls, when he comes to their house, the girls push Cinderella away. They hide her upstairs. And he tries the shoe on their feet, and of course it doesn't fit because their feet are too big or too small. It didn't fit. And he asks for one more girl, and they say there's no one else. And Cinderella manages to escape from her room and say, yes, I am that one girl. And then she manages to show that her foot fits the shoe. And he says, you are my one true love, blah, blah, blah. And then he takes her away from the house and moves her into his castle. And then they live happily ever after. And at this point, I'm like, the dad, did he even come back from his trip? Sorry, this is me being a practical person at this point. But I'm like, so then the dad probably returned from his trip and found out his daughter got married to the prince, but then didn't, what did he do with the stepmother and the sisters? There's just there was nothing after that. There was just no ending to that part of the story. Anyway, the moral of this story, as I found, is to always persevere with a good heart for whatever happens to you, and forgive those that wrong you. And if you do that, and you're patient enough, and you persevere, and you forgive those who have done you wrong, then good things will come to you. Now, of course, you have to bear in mind that these two stories, Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, are that. They are just stories. They are fairy tales, and these are stories that were told a long time ago, maybe before like the 1950s, and this was at a time when, different things are happening at different times. Or maybe not 1950s, maybe 1960s, 1970s, and that was told at that time when things were happening and people wanted to believe in people being good, and they wanted people to keep that moral, have your moral, have your ethics, and be a good person, always be patient, always be kind, always be forgiving. And these kind of stories were told to kind of tell you, yes, good things can happen to you. And they also had the mythical beings, the fairies, the witches, the wizards, the good, the bad. And it was just like a classic tale of good will prevail over evil, And it was one of those things which, yeah, it's a child's story. It's told to children. It's meant to be there to help them as they get older, to believe that good things will come to them. They just need to persevere and be good hearted, and so on and so on, and have those kind of qualities. And of course, not just these two stories, there are lots of other kind of fairy tale stories that are very similar, and they're all to do with love at first sight as well, and finding your one true love, and being kind, and and so on. And they showcase this, throughout the story. So, I mean, I'm talking about stories like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which is kind of a classic, another classic. Another one is Beauty and the Beast, of course. Rapunzel, how can I forget Rapunzel? She's locked in the tower, she needs some help. The prince comes to save her. Aladdin, actually, I mean, if you watch Disney Aladdin, yeah, pretty much the same. Love at first sight, true love conquers all. Also, The Little Mermaid, that's a good one as well. So every story kind of has this kind of moral to it, and it's to help us to be aware. Be aware of how you live your life, be aware of how you behave towards other people. And of course, it throws in the love at first sight element, and it makes people kind of hopeful and hopeful that they too can one day find their one true love, you know. Um, and that's kind of the end of my podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed my take on these three stories, sorry, and Romeo and Juliet, Sleeping Beauty, and Cinderella. Of course, it's only just three that I've picked, especially during this time of love, or if you haven't celebrated Valentine's Day, then hopefully you're waiting and waiting for your one true love, or waiting for someone to pick up that phone or talk to you and say, "Would you like to be my Valentine?" That would be nice. So fingers crossed for you guys out there. I hope that you find someone that you can celebrate with and share your good times with in the future. And we're only in February, so who knows? You've got a lot of time from now to December to find someone. So don't lose hope. If anything, always be hopeful and always persevere. Thank you very much for listening to this podcast. If you'd like to hear more, then like and subscribe to Hanaz Writers YouTube channel and Spotify channels. You can also follow them on Facebook. Their handle is @hanaz.writers. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time, bye.